Welcome to Genetic Deck Construction here on YouTube. Here we are building decks for Magic the Gathering using a genetic algorithm. Genetic algorithms are a concept inspired by our own evolutionary process in which data sets are made up of several data points, and these data points are crossbred between the sets based on a fitness model. The better a data set meets a predefined fitness condition, the better it does, while data sets that do not meet this fitness criteria are removed from the gene pool. And then the data sets are combined to create offspring with a combination of their parents' data. In this way, the data sets can be said to evolve and adapt to their environment. For our purposes, the data set is a deck of Magic the Gathering cards. The point of this channel is to see if we can use a genetic algorithm to create efficient decks and solve the metagame early. I want to be very clear here that I am not creating a genetic artificial intelligence. This is not a neural network. I am not teaching the computer how to play Magic the Gathering. The AI used for all these tests is the AI that comes with the program called Forge. I picked that one because it had a very robust artificial intelligence and it contained all the cards. The other one that I was attempting to do this with was Mage Arena, but it didn't have all the cards, which is unfortunate because Mage Arena had at least 3 different artificial intelligence, one using a Monte Carlo system and one using min-max. So I would have been able to create some genetic variance between which AI is chosen. I originally tried to do this with Xmage. Xmage's AI was really poor, and there was some client server, and Xmage is designed around a client server-based infrastructure, which made it hard for me to run games automatically. I managed to do this quite easily in Forge. In this video, I'm going to explain the processes that I use to create the genetic decks. Since this is a rather technical subject, and not everybody will be interested in it, I'm letting the initial simulations run in the background. Bear in mind that the simulations running in the background are derived from completely random decks that have not yet had very many evolutions done in them. In fact, you don't start seeing the first children entering the tournament until I think the tournament number 5. You'll start seeing decks with the ID 1 underscore a 6-digit code underscore a 2-digit number. That first one before the underscore is the generation. All the decks without that 1 underscore are generation 0 and are the initial random decks. So the genetic algorithm that I've created uses a double helix system. A lot of genetic algorithms don't use a double helix. They only use a single helix. And I don't really understand why. The double helix system allows genes to skip generations and create mutations and allow for better future potential mutations without affecting their current host. For example, a single red card added to a blue deck will just be a dead card, barring mana effects such as Ether Hub. However, you add a bunch of red cards and perhaps a couple mountains, and add them all in at once, then you're starting to see a viable splash. The double helix allows the mono blue deck to run smoothly while having some of these mutations hiding and waiting for their chance to shine. Each helix uses 40 sets of cards, each made up of 10 cards. Now 10 of these are reserved for the sideboard, which leaves 30 for the main deck. This will allow decks to be up to 300 cards big. This can be useful in some situations, such as Battle of Wits, which when you have over 100 cards you win the game. I have not expressly told the data that it wants 60 cards decks, although decks that are under 60 cards cease to exist. Now, while each of these datasets have 10 slots for cards, it does not use them all. It has a number at the beginning that will say only use a certain number. The rest of them are inactive. While the decks are capable of being 300 cards, they will usually be significantly less. The current random deck generation usually creates decks somewhere between 80 and 120 cards. Any deck that is created with less than 60 cards ceases to exist. This is due to the standard construction rules. Besides the cards, there are other genetic factors that are used in the model. One of the more important ones is the deck's avatar. The avatar serves an important purpose in that it serves as a visual indicator of a family's line. Since new decks adopt the traits of their parents, the avatar can serve to suggest which decks are related to one another. I've taken to calling groups of decks that share the same avatar a family. This way, each tribe of decks may contain multiple families, which creates sort of a Montagues versus Capulets dueling families situation. One of the other features of avatars is that they have a bias towards certain colors. This is partly for my own benefit, in that I didn't want to see goblins running blue decks and elves running red decks and zombies running white decks. It just didn't feel right. However, as I developed the code for this, I decided to incorporate it more and more into the deck building process. Avatars now have favored and unfavored colors, and when it selects cards, it will tend to choose cards that it ill favors less. This should be more interesting in dual color decks, where if it is favored of one color and unfavored of the other, it will tend to build decks that are stronger in one color than in the other. When the decks are initially built, and as well later on when the decks are mutated, cards are selected from packs. This uses the same card determination system that exists already in Forge's code for when you create drafts. In addition to cards gained from packs, you also get bonus cards that are legal in the format. In this way, we can add some of the unique cards from the Planeswalker decks, as well as some of the additional cards that are legal, such as the common dual tapped lands, as well as unusual situations like Welcome's Deck 16, which are technically legal with Shadows over Innistrad, but are not actually in Shadows over Innistrad. These bonus cards are selected by name and can wind up having art from any set. If you look at the background video closely, you should be able to spot a prophetic prism from the original Zendikar, as well as a Nissa Nature's Artisan, which cannot be found in pack and was added via the bonus pool. As an unintended side effect of creating the decks from packs, currently the Masterpiece cards are allowed in the format. I've decided to leave these in, at least for a little while, just to see what kind of outrageous decks can be built with them. I will disable these in the future. So the decks are divided into different archetypes, currently one for each basic color, and later on I'll be doing dual and triple colored decks as well. Each of these archetypes is divided into a number of tribes, currently 1, but I tend to have up to 3. Each tribe is basically its own gene pool. At the beginning of every tournament, each tribe submits a certain number of decks. The tournament is then paired off in Swiss rounds, the same way that you would if you were to go to a regular Magic the Gathering tournament. Match points are earned, and they are ranked by how well they did, and then paired off again. At the end of each tournament, the weakest deck in the tribe is killed off, and the strongest deck in the tribe selects a mate to have offspring with. This is done on a per tribe level. Each tribe is a different type of deck, and these usually do not crossbreed. When the strongest deck selects a mate to have offspring with, their DNA is combined, and some random mutations are applied to create a new deck. After this is done, all of the other decks that were not selected for breeding become one step more like the one that won the tournament. I forget the exact name for this mechanic, but it's basically, I believe it's something called gradient diffusion or gradient processing. Since we have a model for the deck that did the best, the one that won, all the others can move one step closer to this deck, and thus allow for some changes between generations. Now, while the intent of this is to make the decks better, sometimes this can make the deck worse, either by removing a card that was key to the strategy, or by introducing a card that just doesn't work. Because of this feature is restricted to members of the same family. Members of the same family tend to use similar decks, just by the fact that they're usually related and share DNA. Some of the mutations that I've coded that can possibly occur, first and foremost, it can change the avatar to a new one. This allows a new family to be created. Decks can add one card to a random card set. It can propagate a card, basically copying one of the cards that already exists in the set to another space, overriding the existing one there. It can flip the genes to be reversed. It can fill in lands. It could fill lands into any null spaces. Null spaces exists in order to make the deck smaller. It can activate or deactivate a gene. I forgot to mention this earlier, but out of those 30 cards, out of those 30 genes, some of these are deactivated. While they contain cards, the cards are not used in deck building. Activating or deactivating them can add the entire set to the deck all at once, or remove a set of cards all at once. For now, the simulation is limited to Kaladesh cards. This channel is being started at the end of November of 2016, Ether Revolt will likely start spoiling in a few weeks. The code is already set up to start adding these to start adding Ether Revolt cards to the decks as soon as they are added to the Forge database. This should happen slowly over time as the spoilers are released. I'm interested in running this just with the Kaladesh cards to see if a stable metagame develops, and then seeing how the slow trickle of Ether Revolt cards changes the metagame. Hopefully, by the time the next rotation happens in the block after Amonkhet, the decks will be fine-tuned enough to actually compete against other humans in the new standard format. I hope you enjoyed this series. Since the decks are developing from a brand new set, I'll probably be doing one video every day just to show you how the new evolution is going. In the meantime, I've recorded several minutes of game footage from the first 9 tournaments. Feel free to watch those if you like. Skip ahead to the next video where I go into detail about tournament number 10. Every 10th tournament is what I call an apex tournament. Rather than selecting cards randomly from the gene pool, it takes the best of the best cards and pits them off against one another. This creates a bit of a stronger idea of how the decks of how each archetype is shaping up.